I was browsing Twitter one day when I found a picture of a game that looked awfully familiar. It was a game on Steam heavily inspired by one of my favorite N64 games, so you know I had to check it out. I always love seeing clones or games inspired by this series and what they can do with it. Even if others will just throw it away for the sake of it being a clone, I always try to have an open mind with games like this. It's also nice to see an N64 game being done for once instead of a PS1 inspired clone, so that's a win for me. That being said, I think it's time to see what that game in question is. This is Valky 64. This game is obviously heavily inspired by Zelda, especially the N64 ones, to the point of having models almost being what looks like direct ports. The heart health is always a big giveaway too if the person ever played Zelda or not. My guy, even the Powerpuff Girls Zelda game looked better at first glance. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt since, again, looking similar shouldn't break a game. Maybe the story can help a lot. Zelda games are always known for their breathtaking and unique stories, so maybe this will have one. The story is about how two goddesses were at war, Goddess of Order and Goddess of Chaos. They fought with guardians, but the war ended up killing all of them except one. That guardian being you. It's a little different than Zelda till you get into gameplay and the statue tells you to go collect gems. Well, we're off to the first world, which is the forest area, and with first impressions I can say this isn't the worst area I've seen, but man does this make me wish I was actually playing Zelda. Everything here just really feels like a carbon copy of Hyrule Field. If you're wondering what the point of this game is, well, you run around and do side quests for people while you find the dungeon and beat it. You do this for every world. Since we're traversing this world, I think now it's time to cover your movement options. You can strafe and backwalk, have two different sword swings, and I think one is heavy and the other is a light attack, but they all feel the same. You even have a dedicated jump button, and you can do a jump attack if you jump and slash in the air. This move is pretty bad because if you already have your sword out, you can't jump, and doing this attack is very slow and usually will get you killed. You do have a dodge mechanic, and it works for the most part, but can really break fights. It's again a pretty basic Zelda experience. We just continue to travel around the land till we finally arrive at our first dungeon, and I kind of like the look of it. It really just feels like a weird version of Forest Temple though, which again makes me just want to play Zelda. The issue now with this dungeon, and I'm going to assume this is the same for all of them because spoiler alert, I only did 2 dungeons and finished 1. I'll go into detail why later in the video. These dungeons don't really feel like dungeons, and at best are new maps with enemies and a few paths you can take, but that's it. You have these switches here and different keys, but that's all the thought you will ever need. Most rooms are solved by killing everything or running through it. This really sucks that these are the dungeons because some of these areas look so amazing, but you spend almost no time in those, but the rooms you do spend time in are the most bland basic rooms with enemies in them. The enemies also are just annoying. I don't hate the looks of them, but they are just reused throughout the game, especially these guys. They just change their color or give them a new weapon. My experience with the dungeon was just running through the dungeon rooms and beating the boss. The boss in the first dungeon was a total pushover, but he was beaten like most enemies in the game. You swing and then you back up and then you repeat. After beating the boss, we receive our first jewel that we needed, and then we head off to the next area, and it's a desert world. It's just very bland, and I actually ran out of places to go before I learned I had to find this guy something interesting to get the temple key. I have no idea what that meant, and after 20 minutes of looking around, I gave up. There's not really a walkthrough of this game, by the way, that I could find. Only like 3 people talked about this game in the reviews for Steam, so I had to go into this shit just completely blind. The only good thing about this area is we had a new enemy type, and it's a bee. The next place I went to was the lava area, and this area really just killed me. We traveled around and I saved this guy who ended up giving me a heart piece. I also gave this crystal to this guy who gave me a hammer. Over time of wandering around, I was finally able to find the dungeon, and this one looked really nice and interesting. Then the dungeon was the same as the first one, with monster rooms to beat and a single switch to stand on that just made a shortcut. So cool. The boss here is also very tedious, and I gave up after an hour of trying to kill this thing. I'll go into more detail why he was bad later on. I finally arrived to the last world, and it's an ice world. and it's again the same as the other ones. I just decided to stop here because I just could not care anymore at this point. I guess it's time to tell you what I like and don't like about this, as per usual. We'll start with what I like. Some things I like are the worlds. None of the worlds looked really that bad besides the desert one just being the worst, but had the best music. I really do think this game does a great job at getting that N64 vibe to it, but also still tries to be modern in some areas. The player character looks really nice. I kept thinking of her looking like a cross between Samus and Dark Magician Girl. I never really had an issue with how she looked, and she animated really well and feels fine to control. Jumping is probably the worst because it's really floaty, but you can do this, so that's cool. Bosses and enemies also look good for the most part, even if they're reused a lot. The best thing I think this game really does is showing that the N64 style is still just as good as the PS1 style. So that's kind of really all that I liked about it. And I hate trying to be negative. I know I always say like, oh, I come with these with a positive mindset where I don't try to be negative, but I'm still going to be very honest about shit I don't like. And sometimes people take that as I think the game is just complete trash because I do sometimes have more things I disliked than I liked. But I want to make this very clear. Even though I disliked a good amount and I liked some stuff, this game isn't the worst thing I've ever played. So please don't take it to heart and think that I just like brutally fucking hate this game. The combat system seems interesting, even if basic, till you realize full swings will just get you hit mid-combo, and the jump slash is too slow and not precise. Your best bet is to swing and then dodge and then repeat. This is because someone on the dev team decided to make these enemies hit like a fucking truck and not stagger. Most enemies can do 3 to 4 hearts of damage, and health drops are so rare unless you get lucky by killing them or finding a random pot, which drops money more often than health. It's just better to avoid combat unless you can't. If the enemies didn't hit so hard, then it would be worth at least trying to kill them for extra hearts. The lack of staggering makes it just not worth it. The fact the sword has a bunch of dedicated buttons to it while only having 2 buttons do anything different, and these buttons aren't even labeled to do anything in the UI, so it really just makes the player confused. It also takes a really long time to pull the sword out, and when you do have it out, you run slower and can't jump. I get it, it's a big sword, but a weapon shouldn't hinder you in battle because then why should I use said weapon? Shops also sell potions for abilities in life, but I'm not sure how these work. I bought a potion of haste, but for the life of me, I have no idea if it's used automatically or if I have to use it. I couldn't find out how to select it either. I tried everything and nothing happened. The worst thing was that I just lost it after I died, so I still don't know if I used it or not. These side quests that the townspeople give you are either very on the nose or riddled up to the extreme. Find my kid in the mountain area. Okay, easy enough, go look in the mountains. Bring me something interesting. Okay, like what? The townspeople also really don't feel like they fit in this world when you stand next to them, or maybe you're out of place and that was the point. If it wasn't, then the slimes are the only thing close to the anime vibe they wanted, while everything else looks like low poly World of Warcraft enemies. I again don't hate them look-wise, I just don't feel they fit well next to a very anime-inspired character. I'm also not a fan of how often enemies are just reused and recolored. I don't mind the enemies with different weapons, but all this does is increase or decrease their hitbox. They still all attack the same way. Going to the music now, this is not good. In the forest area, most of the songs use what sounds like FL Studio's basic keyboard FL keys. It's not good and gets ear grating very fast. The song in the forest area's open area doesn't fit either. I'm in a new world with grand landscapes and things to explore, so why does this music sound like a bad elevator music? The town theme was fine here, but man, it's just crazy how a lot of music is either passable or downright horrid to listen to. The snow world by far is the worst because it sounds like someone recorded the audio through a telephone speaker. These worlds being gigantic and empty, or having some areas filled to the brim with monsters to make the area seem more interesting while these songs play, just kills you over time. Now it's time to cover the boss that broke me. The issue with this boss is not the boss itself, but the room he's in. For a game that couldn't control itself with how big everything was before, this has to be the most cramped area in the game. The map is also filled with 2 flame hazards, 2 jumping flame hazards, while being surrounded by lava. This spider is also gigantic and can hinder you at times to even get around him. It got to the point I would just end up jumping into the lava because I couldn't get around. This spider also has a really bad hitbox. Sometimes it would make sense, and other times I don't even know what attack he was doing to kill me. If you do manage to get him down to half health, he summons a bunch of baby spiders for even more hazards. Sorry game devs, but if your room needs to be a second boss to make your first boss engaging, then you have a bad boss. I know even in Zelda, some bosses like the Fire Temple boss had these fire holes that could damage you for being on them, but these also served a purpose for the boss fight since the boss would use these. In this game, the boss uses none of the fire hazards, so why are they here? I can easily excuse the baby spiders because it's a spider. I wouldn't be surprised if it had babies, and even Goma did this in the fight, but the rest of the stuff, I just can't. I probably fought this boss for over an hour and dying over and over because getting health would require me to either go out and fight monsters in the dungeon that could also one-shot me, or go back to the village and then back all the way here. I just refused to leave and relied on the pots in the boss room, which I learned aren't programmed to have preset spawns. These are when a pot will always spawn this item in question. Majora's Mask does this a lot with its pots. I was sometimes getting up to 3 or 4 hearts, but other times I would get 1 to 2 hearts and a bunch of money. Sometimes just money. What's worse is the game is probably programmed to spawn hearts more if damaged, but if you end up picking up a heart and then smash another pot because you healed yourself, there's a chance of not having the game drop the heart as often. This is why I just couldn't care anymore. I don't think this game is the worst thing out there, and a good amount of these things can be fixed, like the damage output from enemies or making some of the areas more condensed so they can be navigated faster. This could be a lot better for the $5 price tag, but as it is now, it's trying too hard to be Zelda while not having its own identity or reason for the player to play it over Zelda. Then, this made me think of something though. A lot of games seem to do this approach and usually fail. Games try to be what came before while failing to provide anything new for players besides just being that game that tried to be the other good game. Then, I remembered a game that actually would be a great example of doing this. The game that I feel relates heavily to this game was a game wanted by fans for a while. A game even made by some of the former devs to the original product it tried to imitate. That game is none other than
Hey man, are you ready for this?
Yeah, I was ready 20 years ago.
Okay, let's do this.
Here we go.
Oh, it's finally time. Oh, thanks to you, it's the game revival. You helped come true. They said this seems dead. That's a load of yap. And we're here to prove it with this familiar rap.
I feel Yooka-Laylee is a good example of trying too hard to appeal to what worked in the past while losing your identity in the process. Yooka-Laylee was such a big deal for fans of Banjo because this was going to be a revival for us, and it was being worked on by some of the old Rare employees. This rap was even made to congratulate gamers on making this happen. To put in perspective how big this was for people, the game originally had a goal of around $200,000. It reached that in 40 minutes. And by the end of the day, the total campaign reached over $1 million. To this day, this is still one of the fastest growing Kickstarter games ever. It's weird to think about how hyped and praised this game was and how now it's overshadowed by a sequel that isn't even close to the same style of gameplay. It's again because Yooka-Laylee set out to be the game for Banjo fans, and it just ended up being a game for no one since most hardcore Banjo fans while playing would rather just play Banjo, and most agreed it couldn't live up to Banjo at all. This is why these two games failed. You're asking the player to play your game over the game you're copying. These games don't set anything for themselves and just give the player the feeling of, Hey, you remember when Zelda or Banjo did this? Doesn't this feel like Zelda or Banjo? If you ask me, I would love to see the devs of Valky make something with this character that's more original. It's obvious they did try, and even if it's not the best finished product, I do see where it could shine more. This game at times, as I said before, looks amazing and really does hit that nostalgic feel. The combat, if the enemies were toned down and had staggering or ways to not get hit out of combo, would make this a pretty decent combat system. The music easily can be made better or use better sounding instruments. I really do hope if the devs sees this, they don't take my video as I hate this game and want them to quit. I do see talent here, and I feel with time and making something more original, this team can really shine. My final thoughts, I do think though this game is not finished, it needs more time, but that's just me. Let this be a lesson to game devs though, living in the past can be fine, and trust me, I love a lot of the games from my childhood. However, one day we need to realize when we need to move forward. If we don't, we may find ourselves in a time period of remakes and remasters and games winning Game of the Year and then the remaster winning it as well. Oh wait,